The Game Boy Advance is not just one of my favorite handhelds of all time. Dare I say it is one of my favorite video game devices as a whole because, think about it, you could play role-playing games, strategy games, platformers, adventure games, NES games that were ported to that, variations of Super Nintendo games, plus there's more. Depending on the variation of the Game Boy Advance, you could play Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. So think about that expanded library that you had access to. We eventually got a backlit screen or frontlit screen. What matters is that you did not need to have those little terrible lights that just did not work. But we love the damn thing so much, so we decided to dedicate a shorter episode to some of our favorite Game Boy Advance games of all time. So we're going to be talking about that right here, right now, on another exciting episode of A Cast to the Past, with a brand new episode each and every Sunday talking about our favorite video games and movies from the 90s, the 80s, the 2000s. And my name is Juan Velas. I am from Puerto Rico. Joining me as always, we got Ryan McNulty. Ryan, did you own a Game Boy Advance? And if so, which one?
So, I sort of owned a Game Boy Advance. What happened was my sister got one for her birthday. It was the original model, like the white one, no backlit screen, whatever. She got that with Crash Bandicoot. She probably played it for a month, got over it, and then I basically swooped in and I was playing it way more often than she was, and eventually it just kind of became mine, like she didn't care anymore. So yeah, I kind of owned a Game Boy Advance.
You brought up something really good there, that somebody that's listening may be going, Crash Bandicoot, isn't that like a Sony thing? Folks, when we talk about Nintendo and handhelds, all bets are off. But
yeah, before the PSP and all that, so you could have Crash Bandicoot.
Exactly, that changed a little bit
handheld.
later. From London, Ontario, Ryan, we got a third person in here, so let's get him out of the way. Keith Posha. Keith, do you
Hello.
like handheld gaming? Like, do you actually enjoy that?
I do. And you know what? I will defend the worm light for the original Game Boy. It kind of made me angry that you just so flippantly wrote off the worm light. Do you know how many car trips that thing got me through? God, even though I will admit it is a little bit of hot garbage, that thing was just such a crucial part of my childhood. Because unless you went through it, you don't understand the hell of being in the back of a car and trying to play like Pokemon Red from street light to street light.
I had to do that with the original Game Boy Advance. I had to do that same kind of crap. I never got the freaking worm light thing. So
it was a game changer.
I'd sit under a lamp, like killing my neck muscles because I had to lean over to be under the lamp.
That was the worst.
What I used to do is I would have a flashlight on my shoulder and then like put my neck in my shoulder to hold it in place while I would try and play like Game Boy in bed and stuff.
Handheld systems gave kids a lot of neck problems.
Oh yeah, no, but when you really think about this came out in June 2001. So that is the official release of the Game Boy Advance. And I feel like this thing lasted forever because, get this, and I did not know this, it was discontinued in 2010. From 2001, almost an entire decade. And
but
I mean,
the DS came out in '06, right?
Yeah, no, because remember, we got many variations of the GBA. We got the original one that was like the wider one. The first one was like purple, but then we got different color variations. Then we got multiple revisions of that one. Eventually, we got the Game Boy Advance SP, which that thing.
That is
I wish
the
I
be-all,
owned that.
end-all
That
of
was
systems.
the ultimate.
Amazing.
That is the all-spark, as far as I'm concerned.
And then we got the Game Boy Micro, which a lot of people forget exists, which is like a tiny thing. People would have that to play like Final Fantasy games.
One of my friend's mom, of all people, had that. She was all excited to get the Game Boy Micro, and I think DS was already out by then. But I don't know. She had some Game Boy Advance games that she loved to play. But now that's kind of hard to get.
Yeah, no, it's actually one of the more expensive ones, but the Game Boy Advance, I really do think you can make the argument for it being the most important. Not just like the favorite, because you can have a favorite console, but have it be the worst. Like somebody could like the Virtual Boy, and they can make the argument. But the Game Boy Advance was so important to presenting so many things. Like even for working on this video.
No, they
What?
couldn't. No, they couldn't make an argument about a Virtual Boy. Absolutely
I have
not.
heard things, Keith. There
No.
are apologists out there. I guarantee you somebody.
I refuse to believe
No
that.
Virtual Boy, no Oculus Rift, all right?
Yeah, exactly. See, it laid the groundwork for things that are happening in 2019, Keith. You're wrong, man.
Actually, it might be to blame for why it took so long for VR to become a thing again, because everyone was so horrified by the
Everybody
Virtual
had
Boy.
their eyes burned out by the Virtual Boy that nobody could develop VR.
I feel like this is when I got to make my transition because like my point was invalidated. But yeah, we went to Twitter, Cast of the Past. Definitely follow us there on all social media, and asked each and every one of you, what are some of your favorite Game Boy Advance games? And first, we have a longtime supporter, TJ Kinder, Ryan. What were some of his picks?
So TJ Kinder, his favorite picks, he picked Legacy of Goku, both 1 and 2, as well as Pokemon Sapphire.
Did you guys play the Legacy of Goku games? I feel like we've talked about that previously, and I honestly forgot.
I played each for about like 10 minutes, and I was like, I don't know if this is for me.
Yeah, it was one of those things where I loved the concept of it, a RPG based in the Dragon Ball universe, but every time I tried to sit down and actually play it, it just didn't really stick for me. Maybe one day.
Yeah, it's got that top-down view, kind of like a Blaster Master, I think is the name of that game, but it's kind of similar to that, very slow in comparison to other games from DBZ, which you've come to expect, speed, but you don't get that here. And then we have a casual gamer cat, awesome YouTuber, who wrote Golden Sun and Golden Sun The Lost Age. Now, I never played these games, but I always heard people talking about RPGs, GBA. This naturally became part of the conversation. Did you guys ever see this or hear about this game?
I've never even heard about them. I know about Golden Sun on the Genesis, and I assumed that this was just one of those.
You mean Golden Axe?
Golden Axe. Okay,
One is
so
the
I
sun,
didn't
one
even
is
know
the
about Golden Sun. So apparently I'm even wrong about that. So no, I have no idea about Golden Sun.
I was exactly like you, Juan, where it was something I heard about from friends saying you have to play it. I think I tried to play it. My friend let me try it, and I just didn't know what to do. I got lost, and so I probably didn't get more than 20 minutes into it.
Wow. All these years, I just thought it was Golden Axe. I was
Wow.
so wrong.
How you
very
doing, Keith?
different.
Huh.
You doing okay? Want to
No.
talk about it?
No, I'm not okay about this.
So, Keith, while you recover, Mr. McNulty, which is one of your favorite GBA games from your sister's GBA that you stole and later made yours?
So I'll first say that my experience with Game Boy Advance is actually a lot more limited than I expected, unless you count things like, ports from other games. Like I played the A Link to the Past version of, the GBA A Link to the Past. But when it came to GBA games, definitely some favorites. I'll quickly touch on, I did play the Yu-Gi-Oh games, the early ones that came out. I think the one's called Eternal Duelist Souls. I hope I'm not thinking of the PS1 version because that's garbage. Never
No,
played
that was Forbidden Memories.
Oh,
That
okay,
game
okay.
is hot.
There were so
yeah.
many of them.
So there was the Eternal Duelist Souls, I think was the first one, and then there was like the Battle City one that came out after it. Those two were really cool and fun games, and since I was playing Yu-Gi-Oh at the time, it was a great way to kind of practice, because I could literally, with the serial numbers on the cards, I could load my deck into the game, and then
That's
I would
cool.
just get a better version of my deck in the game because I could get the cards that I couldn't afford or in real life. So that was super fun to play at the time. But my favorite GBA game, unsurprisingly, is The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap. This is probably the most underrated, kind of under the radar Zelda game out there. A lot of people didn't even know it existed. In fact, I didn't even know it existed until, after the DS had already been out. But I went back and played it, and it's one of the best, I would say, intro games for a Zelda fan. If you're just getting into the 2D Zeldas, I would say this is the game you should start with, because it's, to play it straight, it's easier than some of the other games. A Link to the Past is a tough game if you don't know what you're doing. The NES games can be really brutal. So this is a great intro game to that 2D style. It's relatively on the shorter side, but it kind of fits in with the storyline of the those, what are they called, Four Swords games They kind of have like Four Swords and Four Swords Adventures. This is like the prequel to that, but it plays much more like the traditional Zeldas. So it's a really cool game. The gimmick of this game actually is there are these little people called like the Picori, and they're supposed to be like the canon explanation of why you find things in pots and stuff in Zelda, because they like to hide things there. But anyway, basically the gimmick is like you shrink down in size, and so it's like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids meets Zelda basically. So there's little puzzles you do. There's some dungeons you do entirely as like mini Link, and then there's some times where you just have to solve a puzzle by switching between, shrinking down to size and then like going back to regular size. So it's a really cool game, and everyone who's a fan of Zelda should definitely check it out if you haven't played it.
I remember the thing that really stood out for me when I saw that, because I never played it, is the visual style. If you had to sort of compare it to another game, it's kind of like Wind Waker turned into a GBA game.
Yeah, exactly. So before they did like the DS sequel to Wind Waker, they definitely took a lot of the art style, like even the moblins and some of the other enemies look a lot like they did in Wind Waker. So yeah, they did a really good job. It looks like a mix between A Link to the Past and Wind Waker. They did a pretty good job with the art style. I like it.
Good stuff, good stuff. That's something that I eventually got to get to. And I mean, I know we'll eventually cover another Zelda game, but I feel like with the Link's Awakening coming out for the Switch, we'll probably dabble onto
That's
the
probably
GB
next
game.
in line.
Yeah.
It's a pretty easy pick.
So Keith, are you ready, my friend? What you got?
I think so. Well, my appreciation of the Game Boy Advance is kind of looking back at it, because I never owned a GBA. The only exposure that I really had to the Game Boy Advance while it was a new console was that a friend of mine, a friend of the show, Midnight Outlaw, had one, and I would go over to his place and play the GBA there. But I didn't really play a lot of it. But looking back, the thing that I appreciate the most from the Game Boy Advance, much like TJ Kinder mentioned earlier, is the Pokemon games, and the Pokemon games that were formed on the Game Boy Advance, being like Emerald, Ruby, Sapphire, Fire Red, and Leaf Green. Those games, in my opinion, are really it's where Pokemon really found their footing. Like Red and Blue are iconic. Gold and Silver was a lot of Pokemon game, but once we got into Gen 3, that's when things really turned up the heat, as far as I'm concerned. The Pokemon itself are some of my favorite. The number one being Mudkip, because I heard you like Mudkips. I'm never going to let that meme die. And then just from the technology that we have in 2019, being able to do different things with those ROMs, like the modding scene in the Game Boy Advance Pokemon games, I think is the biggest and best of the games. If you look at different things, like I'm a big fan of randomizers. The Emerald randomizers are some of the best ones as far as I'm concerned. You can do some very weird and very cool things, and I think
could you explain in a basic way what a randomizer is?
So a randomizer is a tool that you can get for playing things. You do need to do emulation, but there is a way to do legal emulation to make this happen. But it takes the different variables in a game and randomizes them. So in the beginning of the game, your 3 starter Pokemon might be a Mewtwo, a Mew, and a Tyranitar. Just there's no really logic to it. It's just, hey, they show up, or you might run into a Zapdos, a electric bird that knows Fire Blast, a move that it would never really learn. And
I didn't even know the moves are randomized too.
It all depends, because there's certain layers that you can go. Like you can do it so that every single variable in the game is random. The trainers that you fight, like you might end up fighting one of the Elite Four on the first route. They might not have strong Pokemon, but you'd still be fighting that trainer. You can do the most extreme variables, or just tone it down to like, okay, these are only the Pokemon that are randomized, and they still do the same moves, they still evolve the same way. And you could even do ones that like things will change as they evolve. Like say you have a Mudkip, instead of eventually evolving into a Swampert, you might end up evolving into a Blastoise. Every time a Pokemon evolves, it can be a completely random number.
God.
It's insanity.
That's wild.
It's so much fun to play. It's not like a very serious thing. And then that's only one aspect of the community. There's a ridiculous thing that I will never try called Nuzlocke runs.
I tried to do one of those.
And how did that go for you?
Yeah, so I'll quickly explain what a Nuzlocke is, but I think it did become popular around this era. Essentially, you play through the game. It's like self-made hardcore rules for the game, so they're usually self-imposed, not automatically done, but I'm sure there's a way you could. Anyway, a lot of the rules are like the first Pokemon you see on a route, so if you're on Route 1, the first Pokemon you see, if you don't catch it, you don't get a Pokemon on that route. If you catch it, it's yours, but any Pokemon that faints is basically considered dead, so you have to release it. So, yeah,
So it's like
total
permadeath.
hardcore. Yeah.
It's
like
it's a Pokemon hardcore mode.
But
That actually
I will
sounds fun,
say,
though.
I will say,
In theory.
with the GBA games, their original ones, I'll admit that they were my least favorite Pokemon games for a while. But then with the combination of Pokemon Go and the re-release, the remakes, Alpha Sapphire and Omega Ruby,
okay.
I've really learned to appreciate Gen 3, and I think Gen 2 is way overhyped, and Gen 3, a lot of ways, is way underrated.
I
because
agree.
Gen 3 has way better Pokemon. Gen 2 Pokemon are such garbage. It's ridiculous.
It is. It's basically Lugia's the best, Ho-Ho's all right, and the rest of them
and
are
you get
trash.
Tyranitar and then a bunch of filler garbage.
Wow, poor
It's true.
Pokemon. This got personal though, but yeah, it's something that it's easy to forget in a time where people complain about like remakes and remasters. We got Fire Red and Leaf Green on the Game Boy Advance, so it was a reimagining and a full upgrade, both visually.
I mean, that's
and
the
with
way
features.
to play Gen 1 is those games. Don't go
Exactly.
back to the Game Boy
Well,
Color
I
ones.
mean, the way to play Gen 1 now is Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee.
Arguably.
Ooh,
Arguably. Like, it is a bit of a different experience.
Yes,
But-
that's true.
Yeah.
yeah, it's a little bit different. But before I reveal my picks, I got a couple of games here because I guarantee you there's a lot of people that, much like Keith, they knew of the Game Boy Advance but did not know a lot about the game. So Ryan, I have a couple of games here listed with their Metacritic score, just so you guys know, like, there are some damn good games in there, and one of them was actually mentioned by Casual Gamer Cat. So could you list those out quickly?
All right, so we had Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, Golden Sun, WarioWare Incorporated Mega Micro Games, which I thought WarioWare started on DS, but apparently I was wrong.
Nope. I think this is the first one.
Advance Wars, which I had a friend in high school who played that game nonstop, and then
It's like a tactics
Metroid
game.
Fusion.
Yeah, and all these games got a Metacritic score of around 90 out of 100. Like Mario Luigi Superstar Saga, that's an RPG game. So Mario in an RPG world, I think you get to level up. I never played that one, but I've always heard nothing but great things about that. But having said that, my pick, I was really thinking, like, what is a video game experience that I got on the GBA that I did not get somewhere else? And it is the Mega Man Battle Network series. So Mega Man, I don't know why, but the spin-off games, for the most part, have actually been decent. I mean, go all the way back to the PS1 with Mega Man Legends 1 and 2, the Misadventures of Miss Trombone. Like, you got some really good stuff in there. And then with Mega Man Battle Network, I feel like either people knew of it and played it, or never heard about it once and have no idea what I'm talking about. So this game came out for the GBA in 2001. The last version of this game came out, I think it was for the DS in 2009. And it's like a grid-based game. So it takes place in a computer world. So like the .exes, like there are some pretty cheesy references to computer stuff, admittedly speaking, but it's a full-blown role-playing game. But the battle, instead of it being a turn-based battle system, it has a grid system, which I guess if you had to compare it, the first South Park game, it was Stick of Truth, right? That was of the last bunch, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So picture that, but in the Mega Man world, and then you mixed it in with card battling because you actually have to pick, okay, so I can throw a bomb at this point. So if I throw the bomb, it's going to hit this radius, and then you can actually move around and move along with the grid. So it is completely different from anything else that I have ever played.
Huh.
And I'm pretty sure...
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, no, and I'm pretty sure like Stick of Truth has... They had to have stolen this from Battle Network because it is maybe not one-to-one, but it is damn close to it.
To cut you off for a second, I do want to clarify, the Stick of Truth is the turn-based one, and
right,
the Fractured But Whole is the grid-based one.
Thank you, my friend. That's why you're here. But that's what this is all about. And they made a bunch of these. Like, they went the Pokemon Red and Blue route where you could buy different variations of them. But I remember I loved them so much because the battling was very fun. Plus the world, the fact that you were inside of a computer, you were jacked into it. It's like the Matrix, but in the Mega Man universe in many ways. Ryan, don't laugh. Come on, man. But it's like Matrix in that way. It's just so good. And it's unfortunate that, we never got Mega Man Legends 3, that it seems like we have this IP. They made Mega Man 11, and that was good. But Mega Man games can go away from the Mega Man formula and not suck. Yet people don't really talk about that all that much. So it's a little unfortunate. And I thought it'd just be worth pointing out, bringing that up. But something else that I feel like we need to responsibly bring up is Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. We have 2, 3, 4, and I think we got the first Underground. And we have a podcast episode about Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 in the archive, so you can definitely check that out. But I sold you guys, Ryan and Keith, on that game because it is the perfect example of porting a console game into a handheld and have it stand on its own. It's not a great alternative to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. It's just a really good standalone game that I really do think people should check out. Like, did you guys ever play any other... Ryan, you mentioned you played some ports from maybe other consoles to the GBA. Is there one that really stood out to you? It was like, wow, I'm playing this game, but it's in handheld.
The main one that comes to mind is A Link to the Past, and they actually did make a couple of improvements for it. So there is some ways that version's superior. Like, it lets you, when you start the game, kind of it lets you kind of pick a different location. Like, you don't have to just start at the pyramid. You can choose to start somewhere else. It's a little bit more convenient than having to always warp to the dark world or always warp back to the light world or something. They also added a shovel item, so you can... normally you have the shovel, but once you get the ocarina, I think you lose the shovel. But in this, they let you keep the shovel and you can keep digging in the grass and get more items and stuff. Plus, they added a whole dungeon at the end. So there's a lot of cool stuff with the GBA version that kind of makes slight improvements.
We bring this up when one of the previous episodes we talked about going back and playing N64 and PS1. And let's be real, the fact that emulation exists, you can have a Raspberry Pi with RetroPie installed to make that happen, or in your case, Ryan, you have a PS3 that's backwards compatible. In 2019, how tempted are you to play GBA games, regardless of how accessible or not they are?
Well, considering that I thought Golden Sun was something completely different for the last 28 years of my life, I feel like I need to go check that out now, and... hearing you talk about the Mega Man Battle Network games, I want to go check that out as well, because I've seen them in passing, but never really did a deep dive in them. And now I am very tempted to go down that rabbit hole and really have a look at them. Plus, because of the style of handheld games, I do think that there's more room for them to actually hold up better in places like 2019 and beyond, just because they were forced to be more pixelized. You don't see a lot of 3D handheld games from that generation, and it really plays to its benefit because they don't have that grimy 3D polygon look that a lot of games like from the PS1 and the N64 and even up to the PS2 look like. So it does age well. It ages very well, really.
What about you, Ryan?
I mean, hey, I got a DS Lite with the GBA slot, so
Right.
I can still play GBA games on a handheld. So I'd definitely be open to playing some games, because there's a lot of that library I have not tackled. That entire list of highest rated games I rattled off, I haven't played a single one of them, so I got some work to do.
I have a good idea for a poll. I'll talk about it with you later.
Ooh, I'm actually excited about this, but something that a lot of people may forget, and I regret not doing this, you could play Game Boy Advance games on the GameCube. There was a Game Boy player for the GameCube, which I saw everywhere. And it was like $40. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was $40. There were hundreds of them whenever I went to the stores. And I just thought to myself, I am never going to want that.
Oh,
in 2019,
mistake.
I would have given my life. Because now...
You just reminded me.
What?
Sorry to interrupt, but the GBA, the connecting thing, the GBA to GameCube connecting thing, it was the different, not the play games on the GameCube, but the other device that you connected to the top of the GBA. Do you remember that? It was compatible with certain games.
Right.
If you played Wind Waker, you played as like this tingle thing where you could drop bombs and stuff and help out.
I remember that.
And then also... that's how you would play like Four Swords Adventures. You were supposed to have 4 of those like connecting things to do it. But then lastly, the coolest part was with Animal Crossing. If you had the GBA Connect, you got to go to like a secret island that had another like villager living on it, and you had your own like beach house thing. So that was a pretty cool aspect, where it's like I didn't own many GBA games, but I had that stupid connector to do all those little like tricks you could do in other games.
I want to own a Game Boy Advance SP now. I'm kind of in like that mode where, look, I know it's easy to emulate.
I'm going to look up how much they cost, because I'm with you.
They're actually pretty cheap. And yeah, like you can get a DS Lite. That would probably be the way to go. Even anybody that wants to get the Mega Man Battle Network games, I believe, and I will look this up as I'm talking, so this is probably a bad idea, Battle Network DS. There is a double pack. Exactly. So you can get Mega Man Battle Network 5 on the DS. That is an option. And I'm not sure if it's that one, but I know there's a version of that includes some of the GBA games. So that's yet another alternative. It's like games like Phoenix Wright. Phoenix Wright, people associated with the DS. That was actually a Game Boy Advance game. And now it's available on modern consoles. So I feel like if games from the Game Boy Advance are being re-released and coming out now, people are talking about that aside from us. It lets you know that this pretty small package was maybe one of the greatest video game experiences that existed out there. So
we got a lot of ground to cover.
Yes. And yeah, everybody, please let us know. Like, is there something we should do with the Game Boy Advance? It is like an open platform, because I think that the three of us can talk about any console, and it's like we'll figure it out, right? Like underrated top games we played. GBA, it's like a clean slate. So I would not be opposed to playing some of the stuff for the podcast, especially because, I mean, it's portable. Hey, you can put a GBA emulator on your phone, and a lot of those games actually run pretty well, all things considered. But something that is incredible that we got to give you guys a shout out is we do have a Ko-fi page. So this is not the WWE Ko-fi, because I will say that till I die or that runs old, which is right
it's
now.
It's the easy joke.
Exactly. But I love me some coffee. If you guys and gals love the podcast and you want to support us, Ko-fi, which is ko-fi.com, is a website where you can monetarily, it's like sponsoring us with a cup of coffee to keep Ryan, Keith, and myself awake. So the short URL for us is acastofthepast.com/Ko-fi. It's the easiest way, KOFI, and we will always give you a shout out because it is the absolute least that we can do. So Ryan, who we going to shout out?
So this week, we'd like to thank both Amelia Highwind and Nicole Torado for, participating, giving back to the show for about the cost of a cup of coffee. And that goes a long way into keeping the lights on over here at A Cast of the Past.
Just know that you have put caffeine in Keith's body, and he loves you for it.
Keith needs some caffeine. Although Keith with too much caffeine, I've seen that because I have slept in the same room as Keith. So I can actually speak for this when I say too much caffeine on Keith is actually a bad idea. So let's be careful.
We get
And
personal
too much
here
love
on the
will kill
Cast
you.
the Past.
But yeah, also, everybody that leaves a review, you have no idea how much we appreciate that. It is the best way to support the podcast, to get the word out, because in a world, in the landscape of retro gaming, movie coverage is all over the place. Every little review does help. So, Keith, could you read one of them that people left on Apple Podcast?
Absolutely. This review comes from Doe573, who says, "Likeable cast, good voices, funny and overall entertaining, with just enough nostalgia to make you forget how much all these games used to frustrate you."
Yeah. So
Thank
once
you.
again,
I like to think I have a good voice.
you have a sexy
It's my
voice,
good
Keith.
voice.
Ryan,
Yeah.
I like you. You're my friend. Just want to point
Thank
that
you.
out.
You're my
I
sexy
just feel like we
voice
should do that
friend.
right now. And as this gets a little awkward now, available now on the archive. You have an episode about Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. I brought up the GBA game, but the PlayStation 1 game is still a blast to play. Is it the best of the bunch? Maybe the soundtrack is. I think gaming-wise, maybe a 4 or Underground are some of my top picks. If, a couple of weeks ago, WrestleMania 14, or one of the WrestleManias happened a couple of weeks ago, but we have in the archive a WrestleMania 14 review. Stone Cold, Shawn Michaels, Mike Tyson, incredible things happening in the Attitude Era. And then The Matrix. I talked about jacking in Battle Network. If you want to jack in The Matrix, you can jack in to that episode of A Cast of the Past right here. Is that right, Keith?
That is right. Jack in all you want so you can go off and listen to that episode.
You can jack in with Keanu Reeves on another exciting episode of A Cast
To the
Past.
Thanks for listening,
Jacking
everybody.
in.
We're done.